Welcome. Today I have the privilege of speaking with Harvey Lee, the author of Backstage Pass, which is the book we've been reading this month. So welcome, Harvey.
Thank you very much. It's actually quite delightful to be invited to be here. So thank you very much for making the time.
Yes, and I know that you're kind of far from me, so the timing was going to be an issue, but I'm really glad we were able to sync our timelines.
Yeah, I mean that's the beauty of a remote, right? So
That's right.
here I am sitting in a very dark evening time in London, and there you are out on the West Coast in the
Mhm.
warmth.
Yes, well, I'm just starting my day.
There you
So,
go.
so Harvey, introduce yourself. Tell us a little about yourself.
Hello, my name is Harvey Lee. I am the author of Backstage Pass, and I've been, where do I even start? I wrote the book. It came out a couple of weeks ago in February. Uh, I wrote the book after a 40-year career working in the music industry, the video games industry, and then the tech industry, which I'm kind of still in. And the book itself is a culmination of my entire life experience, really, from being at school, discovering my passion, and then critically seeing it through, delivering on it, following that passion. And it's really the story of all the struggles, the successes, the epic failures, and the funny moments and the sad moments along the way. I live in London. I work as a marketing consultant during the day, and I moonlight as an author during the night and on weekends. That may change after this book's been out. It may flip, and I may become more of an author than a consultant. And I'm just delighted that the response to the book has been phenomenal, and it's taken me on a new path. So after working in those categories and those industries for all that time that I talked about, I'm at another crossroads. I've been at multiple crossroads in my life, some of which you'll read about in the book. And I'm at another one now because I'm having an enormous amount of fun writing and getting incredible feedback from people reading my work. So it's a hell of a kick.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about this response to your book.
Well, when you create something new, you never really quite know how it's going to go. It doesn't matter whether it's a book, a piece of music, a painting. When you create something and you release it in the wild, you show it to the public. I'm not talking about friends and family because they'll say everything nice, right? I'm
Yeah,
talking
true.
about really in the wild. You charge money for it. You have no clue how it's going to go. You do your very best. You make all the best decisions you think you possibly can. And it's exactly what I did with the book. I did all the marketing for my book and all the design for the book myself. So I kind of used my chops, my professional chops in putting it together, which was fun for me to do. It was like practicing an operation on myself from that point of view, and using all my skills, knowing that I'm in good hands. So that was quite fun. But the reaction, Kathryn, was absolutely blew me away and I started realizing something was up with the book. When I mean something was up, it was like the way people were responding and reacting to it. When I started sending out the first manuscripts, and I'll just give you a little peek in the inside of how this thing works. About a year or so ago, long before the book was designed, long before it was laid out, it was coming towards the end of the editing process, and it was readable. It was very readable. It was like 95% done, and it was finished. And what I did at home is I printed off manuscripts manually on my printer at home, which is my hardest piece of working equipment in the house. Certainly was for about a year. It was just non-stop printing. And I would print these like 300-page A4, well, legal pad size papers with crocodile clips on, and I would bound them in plastic, and then I would post them. And I would send them to my book team because it's my name on the front, but we've got a team of about 8 or 10 people working in the background that help me put it together. People who are actually in the book, real people who are in the book, I sent them all a copy, early copy. And, there's a couple of reasons for that. One, I wanted some editorial feedback because they kind of know the story. But I also wanted to test the water to see if anybody objected because, it's got some edginess to it, but there's also, because it's a true story, it's 50%, as it says on the front, 50% rock and roll, 50% business, 100% true. Because it's true, and because I use the real names in most of the book, I wanted to make sure that I had enough buy-in from people who were still around. Not everybody's still around, I have to say. Some have
Some
gone
of these things
upstairs.
happened a long time ago.
Yeah, and some folks have gone upstairs, so
Yeah.
to a higher purpose. So they're not around to ask anymore. So that was really interesting. And the feedback came back, and they all went, "Harvey, it's incredible." And these are from the harshest critics, the people who would tell me if this thing was a donkey, they'd call it a donkey, right? It was like,
Mhm.
this thing, you cannot release this thing. But it was completely the opposite. So I felt it gave me some encouragement, put some wind beneath the wings, so to speak, and it went from there. So then I built out a street team and an early reader team and an early reader group, and would send them the manuscripts. And I spent a lot of money posting these things all around America and Canada and Europe, not just locally here in the UK. So most of my readers were outside of the UK. So I must have spent hundreds in postage. And all the feedback came back that it was completely uniform. I couldn't quite believe it. And so we had about 20 or 30 readers before it even went to print, and all the feedback was uniform. And that really helped me solidify, what people get out of reading the book, right?
Mhm.
Because I wasn't quite sure as a marketer. I thought, well, I know, I don't always know best, but I've got a pretty good idea. But actually, what came back was it was very insightful and a little bit surprising, but in a good way, because people were coming back going, "You lit a fire under me. I feel so motivated, inspired. I can't believe, this kind of career can happen without a college education and all the obstacles that you face." And it's like, I feel lit up about this, about my own career. And then that helped me define who was going to get the most out of this book. And it helped me with its
Okay.
tightening up the positioning of where it should sit in the market. So all the feedback was not only very nice to hear, it's always nice to hear nice things, isn't it? But it also helped me on the business side really tighten up the wording, the positioning, the copy, and all of that. So when it was going to get put together and go to market, then I really had a good idea about
Mhm.
what was going to work and what wasn't going to work. So yeah, the
Okay.
feedback's been amazing, and I just got wind. It's just won its fifth award already. So it had won three awards
That's
before it even came
amazing.
out. Yeah, it had won three awards in the United States before it came out. It's won another two since. I'm coming to New York at the end of June for an awards dinner at the International Press Awards, where it won Distinguished Favorite in business books.
That is
So
incredible.
I know, and I'm going to come out. I'm actually going to have I mean, I've worked in the music industry, so I've worked with plenty of people who have been on the red carpet, but I've always been behind the camera. Yeah,
Mhm.
now it's me on the red carpet, and I'm like,
That's cool.
I can't quite believe it. So I'm really looking forward to that. Not that I think Tom Cruise is going to be there, but
Okay.
so next
One can
next
only
time,
hope, right?
next time, maybe he'll be there for the sequel. Who knows?
That's right. So how did you submit the book to these different awards? How did you get the awards?
Yeah, so the awards process, as with all the processes around, when you're a first-time independent author, you're learning everything for the first time. Yeah, you have to submit them, and the
Mhm.
submission process, the time, cost, and money, and time is money, is pretty significant. So you have to be pretty committed to the cause if you're gonna, if you're gonna submit your book for awards. Now, it's okay if you're working for a medium to a large size publisher. There's people to do this stuff, right?
Mhm.
They know who to call, they know what to do. It kind of goes on to the automatic conveyor belt of things to do for them. But when you're an independent author and you have to do everything yourself or with a small team and on a limited budget,
Mhm.
all of a sudden it starts to become quite a sizable project on its own. So when I was building out, the go-to-market plan for the book, one of the things that I really wanted to do, especially as a first-time author, was have as much proof from the market, validation from the market as I could possibly get before the book even came out. My
Mhm.
goal here, not only was it to be on number one on Amazon, which I hit, but the goal really was to get the book to a point where it's not that people didn't want to buy it, get the book to a point where people couldn't not buy it.
Oh, that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
Your product
So
marketing is coming out.
exactly right. It's like, and I was thinking about this, and I've seen this thing in adjacent industries, but nothing to do with the publishing industry. I thought I'm going to use that,
Mhm.
and I just thought, I need to create the conditions to build the case to get potential readers to a point where they couldn't say no.
Mhm.
So what is it that's going to make that happen? Well, social proof is one. As you know, it's a word of mouth business. So advertising is not going to do it, and social media is limited. What's going to do it is things like awards and huge testimonials. And, if I can get a marquee piece of media, which I was lucky to do because I was on the BBC 6 times before it came out,
Wow.
especially five of them were regional, but one of them was national. And that was appearing on that show sent it to #1 on pre-order in the UK. So it does work. And you just create the conditions to build the case to a point where your target audience can't not buy it, right?
Mhm.
So I'm still in the middle of working on that, but we've gotten off to a really good start, and the
Yeah,
awards the awards part play into that. They're like, what, it's won 5 awards, it's only been out 3 weeks, you
that's
know,
amazing.
and there's probably, my agent said, there's probably some more to come as well. So I'm just enjoying it for the moment, coming to New York in June. Just enjoy the moment because it's been so much hard work. I've got this phrase. It's like it's 4 years to write and a lifetime in the making. So if I'm going to come to New York for a couple of days, I'm going to enjoy every minute of it.
So what inspired you to start writing this book?
You know what? It's a really good question. There's a lot of authors get asked that question, and they usually say, "Oh, there was this particular moment where they had this epiphany, or I was in the shower, or I got out of bed one morning and something happened in me." But that never really happened for me. It was a sort of gradual process over a long period of time, as the book is set over nearly a 40-year period of time too, from like 1980 onwards. And I used to tell these stories, all these companies that I used to work for. So I was on the original Xbox launch team, and I worked for Microsoft for 12 years, and other companies that I worked for, like Virgin. As I got to know people in these companies, I used to tell these stories, right? These rock and roll stories, these war stories, tales from the road, funny, crazy things that happened to me and other people, and being involved with bands like AC/DC and other bands that people have heard of. They used to prick up their ears. So I'd be sitting around the lunch table, we're at the water cooler, the coffee room, wherever we were, and we were just chewing the fat and just waxing on, and and I would say, "Oh yeah, and I did this and I did this," and I never ever really thought anything of it because I always thought, well, to me, it's very normal, right? That's my life. Without seeming blasé, I just take it for granted. It's normal, almost to a point that, well, doesn't everybody do this? Look, everybody goes on tour with AC/DC. What do you mean? It's like,
That is so funny.
well,
Yeah.
actually, no, Harvey, it's not the case. So, I went on this a voyage of discovery, really, through all these years in working for these big companies where people they'd all have the same reaction, the three sort of key reactions, as would sort of build a reputation for, Harvey, the rock and roller at the company. They'd all go, "You did what? You worked with who? You went where?" All of this at the age of 19, being on the road and all these crazy stories. And the reaction was all the same. And it got to a point where people knew me for a longer, longer time. They used to start saying to me, "You know what, Harvey, you should write this down, right? Because we've never heard one story twice. There's always new stories, right? There's that. It's like, some people who have had amazing things happen to them. Once you've heard 6 stories, they have to go back on replay, and it's like you go back to the beginning of the first story because there's no new stories. But the new stories kept coming and kept coming because, in a way, the book is a living book. I'm writing the second one at the moment, and the longer I live, the more books there'll be. So because I'm living it, right? It's
Mhm.
being written as I live, literally. So this is just the first installment. So before lockdown, it's about 2019. The feedback I started getting about writing it started to sink in. I was thinking, yeah, maybe I should write some of these down. But then it was like, well, how should I? Then it was like, okay, how should I do it? And the company I was working for at the time had just launched a book independently, and it had done quite well in its own category, product marketing book. And I started getting introduced to one or two people, and I was interviewed for that book actually as a subject matter expert. So I met the ghostwriter and I met the editor, well, same person. And it went from there really. And we got into a side conversation after the interview, and I said, "You know what, I'm thinking about doing this." And she said, "If you're going to do it, I want to work with you on it." And I just thought, there's an editor who actually thinks there's legs in this.
Mhm.
So, we had a couple of calls, we got in the conversation, and suddenly realized, actually, there's something here. There's a story to tell the world that's different. And when you talk to an agent, a literary agent or a publisher, they have three questions. And these three questions are the pertinent questions. Why did you write this book? Why now? And why you? Right? So I sort of went through the mincemeat grinder of trying to come up with the right answers for these three questions. And I thought, well, actually, it's quite easy because it's so unique. And it was its uniqueness that really sort of forced me to do it. I just thought, at the time I was not so happy at work. So I just thought, well, this is another side hustle. And, that book is full of side hustles. And this is just the next one. And so I just set about writing it. And I did the first chapter. I sent it to my editor. And she said, this is knockout stuff. Right. And she's written 20 books in the music and business category, which is what this is in. And she said, this is knockout stuff. So she helped me with the writing process and the structure of the book. And really, once we got the structure down and the tone of it and how to open a chapter and close a chapter, that was it. I was off. So it took 4 years after that. It wasn't quick, but it took 4 years after that. And I'm thoroughly delighted to do it. I'm pretty sure that the next one will not take 4 years.
Yes, it's now you've got your rhythm.
Exactly. And it's not just the writing rhythm. I mean, it's the same for any independent author. Although I actually would say it's the same for any first-time author, whether you're independent or not, because the learning curve is almost the same, right? You're still going to have to build an author platform. You're still going to have to do it all yourself. Your publisher's only going to do certain things for you. And the marketing part is probably going to be the smallest part, which is one of the key things that I learned through the process. And so the next one, I reckon I can write it in a year and launch it in 6 months. So
Wow.
I started writing the first chapter of it last week.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to it in reality. So
Thank you.
I want to talk more about the structure of the book because it's largely your story.
Yeah.
But then at the end of each chapter, you just do the summary of here are your takeaways, which I found really fun. This was a quick read. It was a blast to read. Did you from the beginning plan on that structure or how did you get there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It was a real challenge, to be honest with you, Kathryn, because it was like before I even started writing, it's like, okay, I need to sit down. What kind of book am I going to write? Mm-hmm. And if it's going to have these stories in, it's going to be a memoir of some sort, right? Real stories. And then it was like, well, who am I? Who knows who Harvey Lee is? I did a bit of research and it came back, unsurprisingly, that 50 to 60% of people would not buy a memoir from someone they'd never heard of. That's not really a surprise, is it? But I did the research anyway. And it was just a hunch that got validated. And then the other flip side to it is like, well, if I write it from the context or position of a business book, a pure business book, if I write it like a marketing manual with a few funny stories in it, let's look at the marketing manual category. And it's like, there's 6,000 books available on Amazon right now in the marketing category. It's like, I'm competing with Scott Galloway and Seth Godin and all these guys who are like heavyweights. I've read their books and, I've studied under Scott as well. But I'm like, it's going to be difficult to compete. And I thought, well, it doesn't differentiate me. It doesn't differentiate the book. So how can I differentiate the book? So again, I worked with my editor on this, Sarah. She was brilliant. And it was like, well, look, we need to incorporate both, but it's just how we balance it, right? So again, back to those three questions. Why did you write the book? Why now? And why you? And the answer to that is because of the stories, because of the truth, the grit of the truth in this story, right? And this sort of coming of age saga that unfolds into searing highs and crushing lows, as people have said about my journey. And I thought, well, that's the story I have to tell, but I have to tell it sort of from an educational point of view as well. And so we landed on tell the story as it was, and the way to incorporate the learnings, which is why it's a business book, that was either going to be as we went, so we were going to have block quotes throughout the story, or I was just either going to do it at the end of every chapter, or I was going to do it right at the back of the book. So it's like half and half. coffee and cream. So it's like, here's all the funny stuff and here's all the serious stuff. And where we landed, we did a few focus groups, spoke to a few people who had sort of read a few chapters. And we landed on, no, it's like, to keep the flow of the read, to keep the light entertainment aspects of the book, which is what it is, it shouldn't interrupt every 3 paragraphs and have a block quote. Similarly, for the polar opposite reason, it shouldn't just all be at the back, like it's not important, because people won't remember to be able to connect the first story with the first set of learnings after they've read 30,000 more words. So we've got to keep it fresh. So it was start, stop, start, 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 stop. So like you say, every chapter, it's about 15 to, with the exception of one chapter, which is about an hour's read, most of the chapters are about 15 to 20 minutes to read. So you can pick it up, have a light read for 15 minutes and put it down and pick it back up tomorrow and still be in the game, right? And that's what, a lot of readers have told me. It's just like such an easy read, right? And we kept the learnings pretty lightweight as well, without getting really heavy, getting into frameworks and marketing and business theory. These are lessons in life and business. It's not just a business book. It's an operating manual for life. Mm-hmm. And again, that was some more of the feedback that I got from my very, very early readers about a year ago, because originally those clips at the end of each chapter with the learnings, they were just called business lessons. And the feedback that they gave me was, Harvey, these are not just business lessons. These are lessons in life and business. So that's why they're called lessons in life and business, or key lessons in life and business, because it's very difficult, as with the book, to separate your life from work and from family, because especially in recent times with, remote working, everything is so joined up now. It's hard to distinguish the two. So, we talk so often about, work life and personal life, like they're black and white, like they're completely separate, but they're not. And the book is
your story.
Yeah, the book is a reflection of that. I mean,
yeah.
When I started in the music industry in 1980 something or other, I was so passionate about it that my life was my work and my work was my life. You could not separate it. It was just one homogeneous blob, right? That's my life. There it is. And it was difficult to separate. And I think I still struggle to this day to separate it, to be perfectly honest, but I do a better job of it now than when I was 20, I have to say.
Yeah, I feel like for any artist, that's probably the case.
Yeah.
Because you are so passionate about what you're doing that it becomes your life.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it really does.
It does. And in a way, even though I've been working for the past, 15, 20 years in corporates, not anymore, but have been, even when I was in the corporates, I lived it, so long before I got married, I was, single guy, quite a long time. And when I was on the original Xbox team, I lived that, and so I was Mr. Xbox for 12 years. And it was just like that defined my life. And I didn't push back. I loved every minute of it. And I did a radio interview on the BBC, one of the BBC interviews I did. And the interviewer, Gail, she was brilliant. And she actually summed me up better than I can sum myself up. Right. And she said to me, one thing that I noticed about reading this book, one thing that I've learned about you, Harvey Lee, is that when you find an opportunity, you just throw yourself at it.
That's well said. Yes.
Yeah, you throw yourself at it and you just hope it works out for the best. You do,
You jump off the cliff and you just figure you will figure it out.
Yeah, I'm all in and let's go. And
yes.
The only reason I've been able to do and achieve what I've done and the life that I've had is because of that. And of course, at the beginning of the story, it was because I had lots of challenges. I didn't leave school. I crashed out of school. Mm-hmm. And I had to find my own way. And, I didn't have a plan B. So failure was never an option. And so that just kept me going through all the low times as well. Right.
It feels like, as I read the book, that you basically, you were a master at identifying opportunities.
Yeah.
And do you feel like that's a gift? That's something you've honed over the years?
You know what? So, again, writing the book to some degree has been like a cathartic exercise. It's just like, just get it all out there and put it down on paper. And there it is. And, my kids can read it when they're a bit older and think, God, Daddy was a bit of a tearaway, wasn't he? And Yeah, it is. It's absolutely true. And there was a review of the book done recently, and it basically said something along the same lines, where it said Harvey Lee isn't a master of being in the right place in the right time. He's a master of creating the right place and creating the right time. So
Yes.
then what they call the luck surface area gets expanded as a rule of that. And so you increase your chances of success. And I never really thought about it that way. I just go on. You know what? I just blindly go on living my life how I am and just like bludgeon my way through it. And so to be able to go through this exercise of writing the book and having people read it and people making judgments and coming to conclusions about how I went about things. Actually, I'm now learning more about myself now the book is out, than I did when I was actually writing it, because the blowback on the feedback has been really insightful. It's like, how did you keep going through all those really big challenges? Or how did you feel when the first Xbox came out and you were a part of that team and all of this kind of stuff? But you're right. So it's about creating opportunity. I've always found myself, I had a need. It started with an abject need to create opportunity because I never was given opportunity. Because I crashed out of school, society, the establishment, the structures of all the organizations in life that you're told that you have to adhere and conform to were not very welcoming for me, because I didn't fit into the mold. I wasn't in the production line. It's like, go to high school, get a diploma, go to college, get a degree, and get on a career path and work in corporate, go and work in law, this, that, and the other. And that's the rest of your life until you die. Right. And, that wasn't me. Not only did I sort of push back on that, and because I rebelled against it, and I also didn't have the qualifications for it, there was no place for me in the system as it existed. So I had a choice to make from a very young age, 15, 16, 17. I had a choice to make. I can either accept what's given to me as a consequence of my situation, and just for the benefit of people watching, my situation was crashed out of school at 15, had no qualifications, living at home. It's 1984 in Britain, so it's a pretty challenging time, and not many options, and a career teacher who told me, you know what, you're going to be a delivery driver for the rest of your life. And it's honest work, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. Right. And for a couple of years, I didn't really know what I wanted to do until I was 17. And then I found my calling. It's like, well, this is really what I want to do. I want to go to rock and roll. And as you know, after reading the book, I had the passion, desire for it, but I had zero talent. So again, had to create the conditions to make it work. So it came out of need more than anything, but it could have gone one way or the other. I could still be living in my hometown, doing whatever gig I can get, or I can have a go, right? And I've always been one for having a go, right? And for a very long time, it didn't work out. For a very long time. I mean, I didn't have a salaried job for 10 years after I left school. I talk about this in the book. So, I worked plenty, scratching literally clawing my way up where I wanted to be, but it was for next to no money. Next to no money. So it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s, I'd moved to London, I'd created the conditions to get a job working at a record label, did I get my first paycheck, right? So I didn't know what a paycheck felt like for 10 years.
Right.
And I was just like, my parents must have been pulling their hair out. But anyway, that's another different story.
It feels like maybe passion is the secret, because you're willing to live for nothing to do the thing that just makes you happy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true to a point. I mean, somebody said to me the other day on an interview, would you do it all again if it happened to you now? And I was like, hell no. There's absolutely no way. Because, I'm married, I've got children, I've got responsibilities. And it's like, I couldn't afford to do it now. But when you're 17 and you're carefree and you have no expenses, you have no commitment, there's a time in everybody's life. It's like a window. You've got this window where you could do anything and it won't matter. The result doesn't matter, right? You can have an epic failure and it won't matter. The bills still get paid. right? And it's kind of like free bonus points in life, right? So I used my free bonus points in life from, from the age of 17 to until I had responsibility, right? My responsibility came in my mid-20s when I moved to London. I had a salary job. I rented a flat. All of a sudden, I had to pay bills, right? So, and that's really where things start to change when you have those kind of responsibilities. But for that 10-year period, you know, I was not a rogue cannon, but I was a moving piece on the chessboard, right? And so that was my window, right? But
Okay.
I'll never have that window again. So I'd
That is,
encourage anybody who's got that window to use it.
yeah, leverage it properly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And have fun with it.
So you've talked about a couple of different things, and one is, I mean, you crashed out of school,
Yeah.
and yet you have worked for some incredible companies.
Yes.
How is that possible?
I don't know. I'm still asking myself the same question. It's like, how did that happen? And it's like every other page in the book, it's like the readers tell me, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe that happened. But it did.
Mhm,
And the full story's in the book, obviously. But I found myself working in categories that were particularly, I don't say friendly, but were a very good fit for me. So music industry was a very good fit for me. It was, as you know, a big passion of mine. It's what I drove towards. And I worked in that for nearly 20 years. And when that started to come to a close, I moved into an adjacent industry through sort of by default, by design, but not. So it was a whole serendipitous set of events that I talk about in the book that came about. And so I ended up working in the video games industry, which was at that time in the mid to late 90s was an emerging industry, not
mhm.
the scale it is now, but it was an emerging industry before the first PlayStation came out. So it's pretty early on. And I went to work for a small English games developer, 400 employees, which by today's standards, not a big company, but they were big by English kind of colloquial standards. They were well known enough in the market at the time. And then that finished after a year. And then I got my first sort of big brand name job, and I went to work for Virgin in the same category. So it was working in certain categories that got me to work for certain brands. So as I moved up within the category, so as I moved up within the video games, the brands that I worked for got bigger and bigger and bigger. So I do 3 years here, move on up, 3 years here, move on up. So I did 3 years at Virgin, um, which was an awful lot of fun. That's the biggest chapter in the book.
Mhm.
It's probably the most rock and roll chapter in the book, ironically, after I was in the music industry. And again, it's another one of those things where life and work are completely indistinguishable. So I worked for Virgin for 3 years, and that came to a close. And then it got to a point where I actually got a call from an agent say Microsoft is starting up this new thing called Xbox. You might have heard of it. And I'm like, yeah, I've heard of it. And before it was out, 6 months before it was out, they're hiring, and would you like to interview? And again, it's about right time, right place, part luck, part creation. The creation part was I created the opportunity by being there, by agreeing to move from music to video games. That was intentional. And then going to Virgin, that was intentional. And by having those um, conditions created, it then opened the bigger doors because I was multiple steps closer to the bigger doors than I was 3 or 4 years earlier. I had positioned myself front and center to get the call, right? I didn't know if I was going to get the call, but to get the call. So I got the call and I got the job. And what I didn't realize, so then all of a sudden I'm working at Microsoft. And one thing that I still say that I said then and I still say now, if it wasn't for the Xbox, I never would have worked for Microsoft, right? Because Microsoft as a corporation probably isn't a good fit for me. But the Xbox was because it was very rock and roll. It was, and if you think about it, there's a theme that runs all the way through it, regardless of the size of the brands or the category that I worked in. Everything that I've worked in until I went to big corporates outside of the entertainment industry was very irreverent. The brands, the way I work in, it was kind of rock and roll, a bit edgy. So I worked for Virgin, I worked for Xbox, I worked for record labels, I worked with bands you've heard of. It's kind of one big homogenous kind of rock and roll entertainment type experience, really. So if you think about it like that, it's kind of, it's very different, but very samey at the same time. And it only really changed dramatically when I left the entertainment industry and I went to the cybersecurity world, which was, quite
Oh,
the
wow,
shock.
that's a difference.
Yeah, and this book, Backstage Pass, finishes at that moment, right? So one of the things when I
Okay.
was writing the book, working with my editor, it's like I'd already written the next chapter. It's not in the book. I'd already written the next chapter, and I'm like, I'm not sure when to finish the book. Where should we
Mhm.
finish it? So we decided to keep it all entertainment related. So it's two-thirds music, one-third video games. And the moment that I leave the video games industry and go and work in cybersecurity and print and projection and I don't know what else, non-entertainment related corporates, there's a completely different mood to that story. So that's where we draw the line in the book, and that's when the next book will start,
And
right?
that was my question. So it
Yeah.
sounds like you already know the framework for your next book.
Yeah, I've got it loosely fleshed out. I need to be fair, I need to kick myself up the backside and pull my finger out. But I've loosely got it fleshed out. I mean,
Mhm.
because it's a true story, I kind of know what the story is going to be. I just actually need to write it down and structure it. But
Yes.
the first chapter is already half written because I wrote it for this book. So
Okay.
it was gonna be in this book, but then it didn't really fit.
I can see that.
Yeah, so we made an editorial, me and my editor, we made an editorial decision to finish the book in 2013. That's the era that it finishes in. And
Mhm.
the next book will start in 2013 and be up to the current time.
Now, you have told your outlandish, crazy stories. Are there more of those in this second book?
Yeah, so what's really interesting is that even though the rock and roll finishes and the video games finish and all these crazy stories, these crazy things that happen to me in this book, is that the irony of it is that when I went to work for other corporates, the crazy stories still continued. It's just that the music stopped, right?
Okay.
So I worked for a Russian company for 5 years and they were absolutely nuts. And I'm like, who are these people? I was like, oh, I'm not in Kansas anymore. Where am I? What is going on? So there was crazy people, there was crazy things happen, and there were some sad things that happened as well. And it was a real roller coaster ride, right? And I did some music on the side as well, which was quite interesting. So the crazy stories continue, and one of the things that I'm actually quite focused on, and I'll probably find it a bit harder this time around for the next book, is having it as funny as the first one, right? Because they're
Right.
probably less stories. So I don't want it to be too serious. I want it to be a total continuation. The two books are companions, right? I don't want one to feel so completely different, but it'll be almost the inverse of this book, but the funny stories will continue.
Wonderful. Because that was what, in my opinion, truly sets your book apart.
Yeah.
I've never read a business book that was such a lark, just
Yeah.
a joy to read.
Yeah, everyone tells me that. And actually, one of the things that I had to decide, when we were doing the positioning work for the book is like, do I position it as a memoir, as a music book, or do I position it as a business book? So it was very, very difficult. And one of the biggest trouble that I had with this book was its positioning in the market. So
Mhm.
I decided to position it as a business book that's unconventional, right?
I like that approach.
Yeah, it's
I
like, what is going
do.
to make this book different? Well, the content in itself is what's different, but how am I going to articulate that to people?
Mhm.
So I don't want to tell people it's a memoir because people will be like, well, so what? I don't want to tell people it's a formal marketing book because it's not. It's a business book, but it's unconventional, which is why it says on the front of the book, a business book that's far from conventional.
Mm.
And it's exactly what it is. And then the strap line, 50% rock and roll, 50% business, 100% true, is basically the promise to the reader of what you're going to get.
I love that. And it feels like it is you. It is your personality coming through in this book.
It is and more. And when you write something like this, Kathryn, it's like you have to go all in, which again is me throwing myself at it. There's no point in me saying 50% rock and roll, 50% business, 68.3% true. There's just no there's it doesn't sound right, does it? But there's no
Right.
There's no point because the promise of the book isn't going to get delivered. The promise of the book is the fact that everything in it is completely true and you wouldn't believe it if it wasn't, right? So basically, it's like you couldn't make this stuff up, right?
That is true.
You know, cars going in swimming pools and TVs getting weed on, I don't know, whatever. All of that stuff. It happened. It's true. I was there. I wrote about it, right? And so it's that authenticity as well. It's really, really important that I want people to sort of really pull out of it. And thankfully, you know, the feedback's been fabulous, as I said. So,
So would you recommend to other aspiring writers, just tell your truth? What advice would you give them?
well, it depends what they're trying to write, obviously. So
That is
if it's a business book, it's like, well, first of all, come back to my 3 questions earlier. Why are you writing the book? Why now? And why you? Right?
Mhm.
Answer those, look yourself in the mirror and try to be honest with the answers. Don't gloss over it or sugarcoat it, right? Try to be really honest. And if it doesn't sound great when you answer the question, go back to the drawing board until it does sound great, right? And then you convince yourself and others, well, yeah, of course, that sounds really hooky, right?
Mhm.
Um, if you're going to write something, you know, with true stories in, then you can't just be half in and half out, right? It just you have to be all in, and it has to be authentic, because people respond to that really, really well. It's like, well, you can read any one of many marketing manual books any day of the week. They're all theory and they're all academic and they're not true, right? They're not. They are a truth for what they are, but they're not real life, right? It's academic.
Mhm.
A memoir is the truth, but it's often told in a way that is either glossed over or it's too high level, it's too theoretic, or it's not relatable because it's the CEO of Enormo Corp or whatever. And it's like, I can't relate to this person. He lives on a $300 million yacht, and I don't know, he's got 4 ex-wives and 100 kids. It's like, that's not my life.
Mhm.
So with this book, it's like try to make it as relatable as you possibly can, because most people want to read things that are really relatable, that really sort of pull here. So
Mhm.
they feel like an emotional attachment to it, which they don't do with business books, but I'm trying to set the record
That is
straight on that
true.
one.
Yeah,
A
and
business book is
maybe they
functional.
feel an emotional connection to you, the author.
Oh yeah, I'm getting emails every day at the moment. And it's like, I read your book and I can't believe it. And then they start you. I won't spoil it for people, but they start calling me. They feel like they can start using my old nickname because they feel like they know me.
Oh, that's great.
So I got two emails today from people who know me. Go, I've just finished reading your book, and then they write my old nickname, which I don't use anymore.
Mhm.
But if you read the book, you'll find out. And then it's like, well, you when you're that authentic, you make yourself pretty vulnerable. You have to be comfortable with thinking, well, if I'm going to open up this much, I'm just going to have to take the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Mhm.
But thankfully, it's been pretty much all good. Thankfully.
That's great. So do you feel like you're all in on writing your books?
Yeah, I pretty much. I just started a newsletter called uh, Below the Waterline. It's a professional newsletter on my website, harvey-lee.com. Sorry, can I plug? There you go. And so I write every day, right? So I write every day. My newsletter is a little, it does follow the humor of the book, but it's more academic and it's targeted at marketers, right? So I got a new audition coming out this week. So it comes out every 2 weeks. It's like I call it the free mini MBA for your inbox. So I write more academic articles. They're more sort of case studies. They're great for founders and business owners and marketers. But I always build in the humor because it's just me, right? That's my writing style. So everything's like double entendre or metaphors or funny quips all the
A
way
little bit
through. So
edgy.
it's not your typical marketing newsletter, I have to say. And people respond really well to that. So I have fun with that, and that's for free. So people can get that from my website. So that the writing the newsletter, and I've been writing a couple of columns for marketing publications, big marketing publications here recently as well as one-offs. But really, my marketing consulting career and my conference and company speaking gigs are also just the book on 2 legs. So I kind of do the book live but I'll do a serious subject, but it's never serious. I always make it fun. So it's just part of my style. Is I've become known as the rock and roll marketer, I think, in the past few months.
Wonderful. That's so cool. So if people want to get in touch with you, what would you tell them?
Yeah, so two ways. First of all, I'm on LinkedIn every day. So if you're in business and you use LinkedIn, you'll find me very active there. I post nearly every day on LinkedIn, usually marketing insights or business insights. So follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn. If you'd like to understand a bit more about what I do as my day job, you should go to my website, which is harvey-lee.com. Sign up for my newsletter and send me an email and say hi.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for joining us and telling us the backstory about your book.